Tubers, Tibets, crazy people. I get a fair amount of emails and messages from people. And for some reason, there's just been an overwhelming amount of people asking me, what is an average day or a typical day for you there in the Philippines? And I thought, well, if that many guys are asking about it, I may as well do a video about it. And in this video, I'll kind of tell you what might be what you'd call a typical or average day for me, and now me and my wife, May, and also touch on what might be a typical or average day for you, since we're all different. And the second part will be based on observations that I make with people that I know, I'm friends with, I'm associated with, and what their day consists of. And so hopefully this will give you some sort of insight as to what you might expect once you, if you do, make the move over here to the Philippines. Okay, here comes my little video. So what is a typical day for Paulie Boy and his little wifey, baby May? Well, there's a number of ways that I could come at this. To give you an average typical day, probably takes up 50% of my life this year, is meeting with people. I receive a lot of emails and messages from folks that are in town. They've been kind enough to watch the channel. They said they'd like to say hi in person. They'd like to ask me some questions or tell me their story, and I do everything I can to accommodate that, and I generally go into town. Most of the time, May goes with me. Half the time, May goes to the coffee shop with me, and the other half of the time, she just tells me, drop me off. I can't handle another 2 hours of you talking to a foreigner. So she wanders off and does her own thing with her friends or her sisters. They go shopping or they do this or who knows what they do. Anyway, they're having fun. So that's probably 50% of my life this last year. However, each year I have found has brought its own routines. As you might imagine, the first couple of years when I was single, it had a totally different vibe than it does now as a married guy with 2 dogs. So the first 2 years, it was my quest, and I think this is atypical of guys coming over here, is I was getting the lay of the land. It took me a while to get settled in, of course. Once that was accomplished, I felt good about it, so I started to venture out. And I would drive to places just willy-nilly. I would go up and down every street that I came to, because it was like, well, what the hell's down there if I make a left-hand turn? So I made a lot of left-hand turns and a lot of right-hand turns and went in circles and got lost and drove around. And most of the time, I saw nothing that was out of the ordinary. I found that there was a lot of sameness in the city here, in Dumaguete, Valencia, Bacoong, Darwin, etc. One street started to look like the other, but I would occasionally get rewarded because I would go down. I've still tried to find this street again, and I can't for the life of me. But I drove down, and I made a right turn, and I made a left turn, and I made a right turn, and I was in this open field. And a carabao had just given birth to a newborn calf. And it was nature. It was like watching the Nature Channel. And I saw it right up front, the gift of life happening right in front of me. And then there was this wide open, it was just beautiful. I don't know how else to explain it. It was this perfect moment where there was the beach was in the distance. There was this huge field of grass and beautiful trees. I may as well throw in the birds were singing. I don't know if they were or they weren't, but this birth of this calf, I'd never seen that before. And it was just, wow, the gift of life, you know, nature at its finest. I would never have seen this in America. And so those were the things. I would go off on these willy-nilly trips to meet somebody that didn't show up. When I was in the dating stage, I drove out to Chateauneuf, I drove out to Twin Lakes, I drove out here, I drove out there. And then Unfortunately, COVID hit. I forgot to mention, I made a couple of trips out of the country my first 2 years here also. I went to Vietnam and I went to Indonesia. I used the Philippines as my original plan to use as a home base, and I found it very inexpensive to go visit neighboring countries. So that was a lot of fun. And I was gone usually about 3 weeks. And I always hooked up both times with my friend Gary, who's been my lifetime kind of traveling companion. Him and I have been here, there, and that's another story. So I did that. I met May. Her and I started our life together. And then the YouTube thing came along about that same time. And May really didn't want me doing YouTube. She didn't like it. She wanted to be private. And, but that didn't stop me. So that opened up a new arena. And thank God I had YouTube, because I'll never forget when I got back from, where was I? Vietnam. 2 months later, COVID, March, pandemic, lockdown. And so we had a couple of years of at least 2 years, of some very weird average days. And they were subpar average days. Wake up, you couldn't go to a restaurant because they were all closed. If we got on the scooter and drove around, it was this big hoo-ha to try to find, just to go to the market, was you had to have a pass and you had to have a card. You couldn't have two people on a motorbike, or they had this thing once where they tried to get you to put a shield between you and the back rider. It was so ridiculous, I can't even believe that it even happened. Anyway, and so, but we would navigate around that. We learned to sort of adapt and adjust and finally just sort of accept the situation. And it was a brutal time. There were a lot of guys leaving. There was a lot of attrition. People had to go home. They had to get back to wherever they came from and take care of whatever they needed to take care of. And then they couldn't get back in. And so I had planned to go to America during that time and couldn't. I could get out, but I would never have been able, or I shouldn't say never, but I didn't know when the Philippines would open up again. So the average day for those two, I thank God for two things. Number one, I had YouTube. It kept me busy. It gave me purpose. It gave me something to do. And I made a whole bunch of friends online. And then May actually accepted it, and she started going on it with me. And the minute somebody told her she was pretty in a comment, she was all in. She loved that. And so that became our routine. We would have to do sneaky stuff just to get to the grocery store. Like an idiot, I told them I was 65 years old. 65-year-old guys during the pandemic were not allowed into restaurants or markets. I guess they were going to starve us to death if the virus didn't get us or whatever, or the shot. And so I would have to drop May off at the store and wait outside, give her the money, and she'd have to go in and do the shopping. And then to get home, we had to circumvent the, the checkpoints, because they didn't want two people on a motorcycle together. And I could go on and on. It was just a weird time. But the channel grew a lot. And I want to thank everybody from that time period and now. There were a lot of people that picked up on the Philippines and picked up on YouTube because they were bored. Like me, you were confined at home a lot. And so I think that's where this little channel started its growth spurt. And I want to thank all of those people that subscribed and hung with us all that time too. I want to make sure I throw that in. Oh, another little nugget. A guy that does YouTube for a living, he kind of works behind the scenes, was chatting with me. And he says, hey, you know why a lot of people don't subscribe to YouTube channels? And I said, why? He said, because they think it costs money. I said, really? He goes, yeah. So I thought I'd share that with you. If you decide to subscribe to any YouTube channels, there is no charge. Okay, so that's done. What else is a typical day? Now, the end of the pandemic came along, and what happened was a bunch of resorts and hotels, they got the go-ahead to open up. Of course, you still had to wear a mask, and you still had to show a card, and you still had to sign in and go through all this hoopla. But guess what? All these really cool, top-of-the-line hotels and resorts back then were pennies on the dollar. They were just trying to get back up to running. They were trying to get their staff back going. And so May and I, for months, we checked into some just really nice hotels and some beach resorts. We always booked it for 2 days because, you can check in at noon and all that. We wanted to have one full day there, and we would just filly fart around at some of the nicest places that we can't touch financially today if we wanted to. But we got a steal. And we had the place pretty much to ourselves. A lot of people didn't know these joints are open. And so we liked that. We did a lot of little YouTube videos while we were there. Took a lot of photographs. May's shy in public. So she felt more comfortable. We felt more comfortable. And again, I don't mean to go on about YouTube, but it did give us a purpose. And I think a lot of people were feeling kind of desperate. I knew a lot of guys that just didn't, what do? You're not allowed to leave the house. You're not allowed to ride your motorcycle with a person on the back. Blah, 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 blah. All these rules, all these regulations. Big Brother was in full effect. So that was a knucklehead time. Now, if we fast forward to the present, May and I are moving forward with, we got married, we got her a passport, driver's license. We're doing everything we can to kind of get her into circulation as far as being able to move and groove and travel more. Those are our future plans, is to get up off the couch and into a plane or a boat or something like that and sort of travel around. Now, it was also instrumental being able to lose 30 pounds. I found that I was grossly overweight. And people have asked me time and time again, Paul, how did you lose weight? And I studied it. And a couple of years ago, I think it was December 2 years ago, that I saw a picture of myself, and I didn't like what I saw. I saw this big gut. And so I started studying fasting, carnivore diet, this, that, the other. And that's exactly what I did. I fasted on December 1st. I didn't eat anything 2 years ago. And then I ate one meal a day, and I didn't have any, I eliminated sugar, I eliminated carbohydrates, and I was able to focus on that. And I'm not sure that I would have been able to have accomplished that had I continued on with the going out all the time. I think May inadvertently played a big role in that, because now we have what's called a day off, where we just stay home. We don't go anywhere. We did that yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I'm sorry. We just said no more. We're tired. We don't want to go anywhere. We don't want to talk to anybody. We just want to hang out with each other and sleep. So that you could call to be a typical day of being retired. And it allowed me to control my food intake, because May was cooking for me. I explained to her the program. And so I went from 190 to 160. And that only took 3 months. And I've maintained it since. I think last month, November, I gained back 4 or 5 pounds because we've been going to parties and people get insulted if you don't eat their spaghetti or take a bite of cake or whatever. So I did go off the reservation a little bit last month, but I'm back on track. So I wanted to throw that little nugget in there also, because people have also emailed me, how did you lose so much weight? What did you do? And so that answers that. Now, a typical expat experience out here that I observe, someone that doesn't do YouTube, someone that's just a single guy or has a girlfriend or a wife, doesn't matter. What I have found is that the ones I know, have formed sort of like social circles. Birds of a feather flock together. And these are all guys that I get along with great. May gets along with them. And yet everybody still has kind of their really tight circle. May and I have a tight circle of people that we see more frequently than others. We don't have anything against them, and hopefully they don't have anything against us, but we just don't party. I think a lot of it's got to do because May and I are not night people. So what I think you might experience when you come out here at a typical day will be, number one, when you first get here, you're going to be lost, you're going to be confused, you're going to be, well, there's going to be that culture shock. And if you accept the Philippines for what it is and you decide, yeah, this is it, you're going to spend a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever the time frame is, getting yourself settled in, doing the housekeeping chores, getting set up, getting transportation. And then what I have found, what a lot of guys do that are sociable, is they do just what I said. They get involved in a social circle. And they tend to, I'm in a couple of groups, and I hear it, and I see it. They're going to meet tonight over at Sideways for darts. They're going to go over here for trivia game. They're going to go over here because it's so-and-so's birthday, and they're all going to have lunch together. A lot of it, if you've noticed, revolves around food. So I think there can be a danger in, if you're having weight issues, that you get there, man, and I'll tell you what, I've been tempted a million times. Those cheeseburgers look pretty good. That bowl of spaghetti, that pasta looks good. And so there's just sort of a word to the wise there. If you're trying to control not your income, but your intake, your food intake, it can be a tad challenging out here because the menu choices for protein only are fairly limited. Okay. And then there's guys, their circle of influence is alcohol, and they like to drink. And I've never judged it. I said, rock on. Unfortunately, I've lost a number of friends due to alcoholism, alcohol poisoning, where their livers just gave out. And it's very, very sad, but it's a reality. If you have, addiction issues, you might be cognizant of that. The fact that out here, it's very easy to enable yourself to go full bore on it because it's cheaper than it is back home. It's available. It's not judged. Drinking and driving out here has almost no consequence whatsoever, at least here in Dumaguete, because we don't have what you would call highway patrol. And a lot of accidents happen, I believe, because someone's under the influence. But there's no repercussions unless you're in an accident or you hurt somebody. So I've seen guys that are just barely able to stand up, bobble out of the bar and in the middle of the day and whip off on their motorbike. And we're all powerless to stop him. None of us can really say, I don't know him well enough to grab his keys from him. So I just pray he doesn't hurt anybody else first, nor himself. So there's that to look at. There are so many places to explore and go to. Transportation can be a challenge for a lot of guys. I think a car is your best option. I found that out after 5 years of driving a bike and then finally breaking down and getting a cheap little car. It is safer. It is more convenient. It's a pain in the ass to drive because of the congestion, but I believe the pros outweigh the cons. So an average day is not only going from point A to point B, but an average day also includes me trying not to lose my mind as I scream silently at people doing goofy stuff. I come this close to killing them or getting killed. So there's that to take into consideration. The average day out here doesn't really have an average. I never know when I wake up. This morning it was raining like crazy. And I thought, well, that would kill it if I had a bike only. And now it's as sunny as can be. There's a lot of noises. There's a lot of smells. There's a lot of, and again, some more noises that you need to get accustomed to, which I have. The worst noise I hear is a drunk expat. The animals and the chickens and the dogs don't bother me nearly as much. So that sort of is our typical life out here. It's not typical at all. There's days where I wake up and I go, what do you want to do? And I can look at my wife and I can see she might be a little under the weather. She goes, I'm lazy. And you know what? I'm totally cool with that. If I'm supposed to meet somebody that day, one of two options. I say, I'm going to go meet this guy and have coffee with him, and I'll be back in a couple hours. And 99% of the time she says, cool, great, that's fine. Other time, and I always say, do you want to come with me? And she'll say, no, I don't feel good. And then there's that 1% of the time where I'm not feeling that good either, and I might have to call this guy up and say, you know what, boss, can we reset our appointment? I'm not feeling that good. And people are cool with that, and I'll stay home with the wifey. What's the most beautiful part about being retired is that each day is what you make of it. It's what you want to do. So today I said, you know what, I feel like doing a video about this, where yesterday I didn't. And so I'm doing it now. Tomorrow I may wake up and just feel lazy, and I can tell my wifey, I feel lazy. I just want to lay around. I don't want to do nothing. I don't want to think. I don't even want to look at the phone. And she's fine with that. We'll just stay home together and play with the dogs. Other days, we're feeling adventurous. Day before yesterday, man, we were driving all over these hills, up and down, places I'd never been before. We went way up to this place called Highland Coffee or something like that we heard about. And it was way, way, way up a mountain. It was cool. It was something we didn't even know was there. There's never, I can honestly say, I could never in 100 years explore and see everything there is to offer right here on my own little island. I know that in the back of my mind. And it actually kind of gives me, it's kind of calming to know that no matter what day I wake up, if I should never be bored. I have no excuse to be bored. I have a beautiful wife. I have my doggies to play with. I have great friends. I'm not always feeling that great. And so if I'm not feeling that great, I don't have to show up. I don't have to go to an office. I don't have to go to a meeting. I don't have to go to anything. And if I do have plans that need to change, I can reschedule them. I think most guys, when they get out here, a lot of it revolves around food and restaurants and socializing. There are other guys that are much more reclusive, and this is a good fit for them also, because they can get themselves set up and they can choose not to go where a bunch of other expats are. And they can choose to either hang with locals or just hang alone. Write that book, read that book. Just do whatever it is that people that are more introverted and to themselves do. They have hobbies. A lot of guys out here golf. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on, but I thought that this would be a little insight. It's not that in-depth. It's not that detailed. It's not a perfect video. I understand that, but I thought it would just answer that question because I've been asked so many times. And once again, I just want to thank everybody that has subscribed and been loyal and watched the channel and given us the old thumbs up kind of deal. All right, kids, we'll see you in the next video.